My name is Tamara Mosley, and I serve as the HR Director for GTA. I have the pleasure of introducing your next presenter, David Allen. You already know him as a cybersecurity leader, consummate professional, and fellow veteran, but today you'll come to know him as a staunch supporter of developing the state of Georgia's cyber workforce almost from the cradle. It's definitely something that's near and dear to me. David Allen leads GTA's Office of Information Security, which unifies information security responsibilities for the state's IT enterprise, the Georgia Enterprise Technology Services Program, and GTA. Prior to joining GTA in 2019, David served as the Chief Information Officer G6 for the Georgia Army National Guard. David has held numerous IT positions over his 20-plus year career at companies such as Bell South Telecommunications, Accenture, and Wayne Farms LLC. He holds a Master of Project Management from DeVry University and is a 1995 graduate of North Georgia College. He earned a Master of Strategic Studies from the U.S. Army War College in 2019. In addition, David holds several key management and cybersecurity certifications, including Project Management Professional, Certified Information Security Manager, GX Certified Enterprise Defender, and Certified Scrum Master. With no further ado, David Allen.
Hello again, everyone. For those just joining, I am David Allen. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for the state of Georgia. And you've had a couple of great speakers so far. I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk to you about building and maintaining the cyber workforce. It's one of the first things that I tackled upon taking this job a couple of years ago. And just wanted to bring some of what we've done forward, and hopefully you'll be able to pull some nuggets out of my presentation and help your own organization in developing this valuable asset. So here's our agenda for today. We'll go through a brief introduction. We'll talk about the cyber trends and problem set. We'll go into some description and position development, care and feeding of our cyber workforce, sizing of that workforce, and then some recruiting and retaining tips, ending up with our Q&A panel. So first, just a little bit about me. I commissioned in the regular Army in 1995, straight out of college, and to the Signal Corps. For those that don't know what that is, that's really just IT for the Army and field artillery. Left there after about 4 years and bounced around the private sector for about 12 years, finally landing back in the employ of the federal government as a federal technician for the Georgia Guard full-time, where my last position was as the CIO and Chief of Cyber of the Georgia Army National Guard. And that's bringing the cyber mission forces into the Guard is what got me turned on to cyber. Very exciting new career field at the time, and that's what brought me to my current position. So let's get right into it. First and foremost, why do I need a dedicated cyber workforce? Why is it important? Well, one only has a look to some of the top cybersecurity trends for 2021. With COVID and the workforce primarily going remote, that instantaneously increased the attack surface out there. So it brought about things like having your VPNs exploited, and just workers in general aren't behind your security perimeter anymore. So they're more subject to cyber attacks. And I've been in IT a long time, and just like the IT field, over time got more and more complex, more and more specialized, and you have a wide variety of employees today and different type of IT concerns. There is no one size fits all IT employee. The same is the same for cybersecurity. It has got much more complex. There are many more tools than there were just a few years ago, requiring different skill sets and different people to operate those, especially if organizations are big enough to run their own security operations center. So all those things taken in sum really begs the question on why wouldn't you have a dedicated cybersecurity workforce? To some, it may look just a one-off of IT, but it is very different in ways we'll talk about. But the primary one that I always throw out there is, unlike just managing a server or a network, our cybersecurity professionals, specifically our defenders and our incident responders, are dealing with a living, breathing, thinking enemy every day that is defending your network from harm. And with that becomes a unique skill set. And that skill set is maintained in a different way than traditional IT. So if you don't have a dedicated cybersecurity workforce now, you certainly will in the future if you're managing any level of technology, especially that technology that is exposed directly to the public internet. So once I've made my decision that I'm actually going to have a cyber workforce, what are some of the problem sets I'm going to look at and actually building and maintaining it? The one that comes out immediately in any discussion you have in government these days, if you're a cyber professional or cyber executive, is I can't compete with the private sector, which is true. Cyber talent is at a premium. There are a lot of gaps out there with cyber positions. So companies, especially big companies, are willing to pay top dollar for talent. So that, especially coming out of top university programs, so that makes it difficult for us working in government. Recruiting is actually difficult as well if you don't have dedicated cyber positions, which we've hit on the importance of having a dedicated workforce. But it makes it hard to understand what we're hiring for if we're trying to modify IT positions into cyber specific type of jobs if we don't have that clearly defined on what we're looking for. A lack of dedicated salary structure for cyber positions. So again, going back to our competition with the private sector, if we don't treat cyber a little bit differently from a salary perspective, even though it's government and we may not be able to look at it in exactly the same way that the private sector does, it does make a lot of sense to pay attention to the structure and look at it from a competitive standpoint. And we'll get into how we do that. A lack of dedicated funding for certifications and training. Training budgets suffer largely, especially when we're going under downturns. But for this particular field, certifications to go with these skill sets and the training are absolutely essential to maintain skills for these employees. Especially things you don't get to do every day. Your incident responders don't get to respond to an incident every day. Probably not something you want them to do every day necessarily. So some of that deep forensics training is something you actually have to train on in the event you do have to do it, just like a soldier would train on their particular skill set in the event they may have to do it for real in a wartime scenario. Same goes for a cyber professional. They could go a while executing a certain task, but you still have to stay trained up on it. No clearly defined talent pipelines or partnerships. Like I said, talent is tight and it's at a premium. So organizations are going to have to come up with some special strategies and actually pool their resources to recruit and find some candidates for their open positions in the government sector. Continuing to go after it in a siloed fashion just isn't going to be appropriate or achieve your strategic plans. We have retention issues in government. Some of that is just the culture of government and how we treat these new employees and the new employees coming into workforce that want to make an impact. So we've had to reevaluate some of that. And then competing priorities with other IT concerns. So without proper communication plans and strategic plans and educating senior management, a lot of IT organizations within government agencies struggle to really paint a picture on why this is important and why this is any different than their normal IT concerns when we're talking about cyber. So those are some of the challenges that you see out there in the government space when approaching executives or other people. If you're in charge of IT and you see some similarities here, you're not alone. But communication is key, and just understanding the why is important to getting your program off the ground. So next I want to get into some of the position descriptors and standardizations of what we did Georgia Technology Authority, we do have some dedicated cyber positions. They're in my Office of Information Security. We had to take a look at that from day one to create them from scratch, because we, just like many other government organizations, were nested under what were IT position descriptions. So if you're looking for where to start when it comes to developing these, personally, I went to the NIST special publication or the NICE framework for looking at what positions were out there and what we might use. So if you go into this and you work with your HR personnel on this, there's every conceivable description for a position out there. So it gives you a nice framework to start with if you're going to tailor specific positions for your organization. You may be doing a complete redesign. You may be starting from scratch. We were starting from scratch, but it gives you a good idea of the depth and the breadth of the type of cyber positions that are out there today. So it's easy to access. It's out there for anyone, but it's something you really need to take some time with and get familiar with before you decide to apply. But it really is the de facto standard for government when going out and finding these specific descriptions. It's all out there for you. It's just a matter of tailoring it to your specific situation in your organization. The other thing that I'll mention here before I show you our approach is we tailored it to be a little bit generic. When you go into a NICE framework, you're going to see a lot of very specific position descriptions as well. But if you're an organization that is if you do have cyber positions, more than likely in government, you started out with things that are more of a policy concern and not as much of a technical concern. You may choose to do like we did and start out a little bit generic in your approach. And as you add complexities, add technologies, fold in some of those more specific job types for your positions. That is just a way. But don't get discouraged when you get in there and see exactly how many that are out there. It can be quite a daunting task, but kind of going with a plan on what you think your organization may look like, and it helps you sift through a lot of the information and get down and extract what you need. So the next slide, I just want to show our cyber workforce structure that we came out with. So, and in this instance, I'm actually going to start at the top because that's typically where organizations already have some individuals in a type of cyber position, starting with myself as the Chief Information Security Officer and directors of cybersecurity and information security officers. And those senior professionals and executives have been out there for many agencies, especially the state of Georgia. You know, if an agency has at least one person dedicated to cyber, it's that information security officer, and traditionally has been mainly a policy and a governance type of position. What you see down further in the stack is what we have extracted from the NICE framework and created for our positions in our organization. So, and we zeroed in on two specific types of descriptions: that of the specialist, that is a very broad definition for a cyber position, and aligns well with those existing policy and governance positions that are out there today. And then as a nod to the more technical nature of what we're going to require in the future, we have our analyst positions, and that can range from things such as threat intelligence analysts to incident response to forensics to what have you. So anything of a technical nature, we were rolling up into kind of an analyst role. And then probably the most exciting thing for us, and that helps to address some of the cyber shortage and competition and what we view as one of those challenges with competing with the private sector, is the creation of our cybersecurity technician position. So this is an entry-level position. A person coming into this at a much lower bar of entry, with, say, just a certification. So when you're out there looking for talent, people coming out of high school on technical tracks, people coming out of associate's degrees or technical colleges with just certifications, all these are people that can be targeted for entry-level positions within Georgia state government as a result. Whereas before, the bar to entry under some of our IT positions was much different. But the competition for cyber talent is so high that you're gonna have to get creative in what you look at and redesign some of your minimum standards to get some of these people coming out of a cyber program. Maybe they're changing career paths or what have you, and have, you know, a lot of experience in another field, and they're just beginning to get into cyber, but they have a lot of professional maturity and probably some other technical skills, maybe in some other areas, and just want to make the transition to cyber. You know, these are the type of people that state and local government should be targeting to get some of those gaps filled. The other thing to consider, like I mentioned before in a previous slide, is the salary structure, or the lack of a salary structure for the cyber workforce. So in our approach, we just started to think, you know, if we're going to look at salary, and, you know, where is that amount that we need to peg a particular position level at, you know, without having to pay a lot of money for a given study or what have you, is just take a look at it from, you know, I just call it my Baldr's perspective. For those people familiar with the Baldr's criteria, like, who are my competitors anyway? You know, can I truly say the private sector is my competitor? Probably not, but, you know, I can say I'm a competitor for talent with the federal government or a local government, you know, any other government entity or someone along those lines would be my competitor. So we took a hard look at the federal general schedule when it came to salaries and where they were with entry level and what type of levels they were assigning to cyber positions that were open out there. And if you go look at that GS schedule, and you know, I'm intentionally not sharing our own salary levels here because we're still working through that statewide as an approval, and not just with GTA, the agency. But if you take a look at the GS schedule, we align pretty closely with that, with the caveat that I'm really want to be competitive at the entry level and those professional one levels. So if you're looking at a Atlanta GS pay scale, you would see us a little bit higher in those entry level positions to be more competitive than the feds when it came to some of that talent. And then as you get through the upper middle to higher level executive positions, we're in pretty close alignment with that. But the point being, we're really targeting those entry level positions, people coming out of tech schools, people coming out of associate degree programs and college. That's where a lot of our need lies. So that's where we're targeting the most, and wanted to make those salaries attractive and competitive in comparison with our peers. So here, just kind of illustrate that point a little bit more, I've highlighted where some of those requirements for entry in a particular level rest. So previously, when we take a look at some of our IT positions, many of them read where, you know, that bachelor's of science or bachelor of arts degree was a requirement. So we were looking at a 4-year degree. But we have modified that a little bit. We've kept that at the analyst 2 level with the education and the degrees of experience that are there. But then when you get to level 1s, we brought it down to the associate's degree level. And then as I previously discussed with the technician, which is really the game changer in my mind, is holding that entry level cyber certification per our state guidelines, which I'll cover here in a little bit, or within 12 months of start date. So we've thrown this position out there. I've actually hired a couple of individuals by this standard, and they have been very successful. Young talent, young to the business world, young to cyber, but very trainable, eager to learn, and been a great round out to our team. And we've got a healthy mix of all these positions within the Office of Information Security. and we haven't had any problems, finding this talent. It's just tailoring our positions, looking for the right desire and drive, and getting them in position and supporting them in the appropriate training. So that brings me to the training aspect of our certifications. What does that look like? How should I incorporate it? And when it comes to training, what philosophy should I have in the care and feeding of this new type of employee? So we do have this published as a guideline out there on the Georgia Technology Authority website, and you can find all our security policy standards and guidelines there. If that's something else you're looking to build in your organization, or you're looking for some templates to leverage. But we published this guideline very early on, and it has a couple of pieces to it. First is the first slide covers those certifications that are offered by the Georgia Cyber Center. And they're not offered not just for state employees, they're open to anyone. Our new cyber center down there in Augusta. So you see it aligns with each one of those type of position buckets that I displayed previously, and it gives you the certification that's there. So we wanted to align certification requirements with positions. One, just developing that baseline of training for employee, but two, each one of these certifications has to be maintained as any other certification would, and the pursuit of those continuing education credits ensures that that employees are going to stay up on that certification, because it's required for their particular position, and we do help them with at least one certification to maintain that from a financial standpoint. One thing you'll find out is once cyber people start getting certifications, they usually want to get more certifications. So you may have to come up with your own policies and rules around how much of that you fund. But for us, we tie it to their position, and that's the one we support. And they're free to go and do as much on their own as they want, because there's a lot of different ones out there. But as you see, it starts out entry level, intermediate level, and then advanced level, and all these are available at the Georgia Cyber Center. The second one we have in the guidelines are some of the other certifications that are just out there, generally accepted. It can be found on the open market in many different private organizations selling training or what have you. But you'll find that if you go out and look for other similar guidelines like this, there's one in the Department of Defense, the 8500, that aligns their certifications in information management and from a technical aspect. We've incorporated some of that into this guideline and boiled it down a little bit for our purposes, but again, broken up into entry level, intermediate level, and advanced level on the things that are applicable to the positions we've thrown out there. So then brings me to our overall training philosophy when it comes to our team. As we just talked about with the certification side of things, that's our individual training certification. We push primarily for our team members to get their certification that relates to their job. And then we have individual training on a weekly basis through weekly labs, things of that nature, that helps keep up some of those skill sets. So that may be something that's specific to the certification. It might be specific to a tool that we're using or we had just purchased, but we do have that individual training. And I think the main thing to keep in mind here is that this is really part of a training plan that we develop and is conducted annually. So every year we're starting out with this individual training and recertification. Then you see the next link in the chain is that collective team training. So things like incident handling, training on that via tabletops. There's a lot of different events out there that are either free through academia or very little money, or you can take your team and you can do fun training events like capture the flag events that are cyber online against other teams to keep some of these cyber skills sharp once they have them and work as a team. And then finally, we have a collective or organizational training event, and those of you from the military will be very familiar with the cycle and the concept of a culminating training event. And that's really what we've constructed here. There's exercises through federal partners, such as Department of Homeland Security. There's various tabletops you can conduct amongst multiple organizations. And then for us, our premier exercise is Cyberdog that we conduct at the Georgia Cyber Center. And this year will be our third iteration of that exercise. And that's a culminating training event on keyboard, active cyber defense against another red team, for our practitioners to go and learn in something other than a real-time incident environment, and get exposed to new skills, get placed in some positions outside of their comfort zone, things of that nature. And there's many states that are moving in this same direction. So just to give a little bit more information on Cyberdog, I mentioned we're returning to our in-person execution this year. We've already had our initial planning conferences with state agencies. We were looking to fill roughly 30 to 40 blue team positions. So we're looking forward to getting back in person this year and training with our partners and state agencies. And we're looking to grow that every year. We're still a little bit limited this year due to some COVID restrictions and distancing that'll still have to occur when we do it face-to-face this year. But we intend to grow that as much as we can. And participation and interest continues to grow every year. One unique thing about this exercise, though, is through our partnership with our National Guard, and our National Guard Cyber Protection Team does a pretty good job as our Blue Mentors during the exercise and also doing some Red Team activities. But through the state partnership program that every state guard has, we look forward to participation from their partners of the country of Georgia and Argentina. For our first exercise in 2019, we had the country of Georgia. And now this year, we're looking for some participation from the Argentinian contingent. So that's some great learning that goes on with getting some of their cyber professionals in and sharing that knowledge, and also learning how they do things in their country and what some of their needs are. Our participants range in a number of skill sets in a simulated environment. And we also have some pre-training requirements that occur through our learning management system. So we're very excited about this exercise. It was a NASIO award recipient this past year. So we continue to be excited about the potential for growing our cyber workforce through this exercise. Now I'll talk a little bit about sizing the workforce. So one thing, I'm a member of our state cyber board, and when we were approaching the question of cyber workforce and the initiatives we were going to have, the first thing that came out is, well, how do agencies know what they need to look like? So how can we give them a little bit of guidance on, how many cyber people they should have given their organization? So we went through the process of having a couple of studies and collecting data from our state agencies. And this is the guideline we came up with for that. Now this is just a basic framework that you may use for this. There's many different factors that come into play, whether you're managing all your stuff on-prem, whether you have stuff going to the cloud, whether you have any outsourcing concerns within your organization. But in general, we took a stance of looking at it from how many employees you had and how many total spend you have, in a hope to level out some of the agencies that may have a little bit of employees, but they have some outsourcing. You would see that difference in the IT spend. But looking at it and looking at our own state agencies as a template, we constructed this, and we'll share these slides at the end of the conference. But certainly you're free to take this and share this and utilize it for your own planning as necessary. And you see it lines up with the position descriptions we've given previously. And one thing that may be a little bit confusing when you see the ISO as a service, that is a specific service that GTA does have, and some agencies have taken advantage of, where they get some additional help, or they don't have a current information security officer, and they've contracted some of that out. So that's what you see there. But most of those agencies either have an ISO or they're contracting that out. But the state of Georgia, we have a lot of agencies that have, and commissions that have some very low numbers in terms of head count. So that's where you see that bucket there. But for anyone outside our executive government, you just think that of that in terms of your really small entities that maybe only have room for one type of cyber professional. So I mentioned the study we did for the cyber workforce, and just wanted to share a little bit of those results. So when we did our survey, and we have roughly 103 agencies out there, I got 57% response out of them. And by the definitions we threw out there, roughly 49% were meeting requirements based on the guideline that you just saw, which was a little bit higher than we had thought. There still may be some dual hat kind of situations going on there that drove that number up a little bit higher than it is in reality. But the conclusion that I brought out from that survey that I think is probably the most important is the distribution of jobs and where they lied as far as where the critical needs were in the organizations. And going back to constructing our cyber workforce and the scale and the pyramid you saw previously, taking that strategy of the entry level and looking for that entry level and level one type of position, I think you see that play out in the survey when you look at the distribution. So if we're really going after those mid-career, mid-level to entry-level jobs is where the needs really are, then we definitely can be competitive. We can construct our positions. We can relook our security salary structures, and what kind of positions we're looking to bring into our organization. And there is talent out there that we can go after. We just need to think about cyber in a little bit different way than we have in the past. So finally, for our recruiting and retaining. So recruiting pipelines, what to look for. Look for a desire to learn, look for non-traditional talent. In my opinion, there is no talent shortage. I've seen plenty of people coming from other types of skills and educational backgrounds into the cyber field lately. Seen quite a few biology majors coming into the pipeline. Traditional STEM majors have all the math background, it's a scientific background. Move into cyber, move into IT. There's a lot of talent coming out of local universities. We've mentioned technical colleges, K through 12 academies are out there today. A lot of programs are gearing up again for transitioning veterans. Some of these grants will actually pay your organization to have them come in an internship scenario and work in the hopes of securing full-time employment. Different nonprofit organizations, one specifically in the Atlanta area is one called Year Up that we've worked with in the past, and we've actually made a hire out of that organization for high school kids from disadvantaged backgrounds with technical aptitude, go through a year-long program, and at the end get an internship or go on to college or get a job. Very, very sharp young people just looking for a chance there. And then, of course, for the state of Georgia, we have our own Team Georgia, our traditional recruiting pipeline out there. Just taking what you have, trying to centralize it, try to get your known requirements out there in collaboration amongst your different agencies. I think will go a long way to addressing what we're trying to do with getting cyber expertise within our organizations. Sorry about that. So for retaining lessons learned, we've talked about it briefly, but the paid certifications and CPE training. A lot of organizations people go to, even private organizations, this is something that isn't typically done. So maybe your salary structure isn't as high as some of the others. Having paid certifications and training can go a long way. I mean, a lot of organizations, and I've experienced the same through my own job searches over the year, you know, they just want to hire people off the street ready. But if you're willing to identify the potential and put some investment in training, there definitely is some worthwhile talent out there to go after. It just takes having that conversation with your management that it is the approach you're going to take, and that is an investment you're going to make in the talent you're bringing in. And you're not going to always bring out someone right off the street with every single requirement that you need, but they've got some background, they've got some aptitude, and you know you can put them through training and they can be, you know, successful the first time through. Having clearly defined career paths. A lot of times when we have summits and presentations like this and we want to talk about our workforce, you know, it comes down to the young people, and it's always a generational discussion, you know, how they're different from the past. Well, what I've learned from dealing with our newest college graduates and employees is, unlike when I was coming up, and you know, one of my first jobs was at the phone company in the private sector, and you're just expected to keep your head down, listen and learn, and you might do something impactful, you know, in a few years once you've earned your stripes or your lumps. That's not the thought process of the people coming to our workforce today. They want to have a job that has meaning. They want to be impactful. They want to bring something to the table and contribute, you know, almost immediately. And the more we can make those paths for them to do just that, whether it's training, you know, getting them on projects, getting them on assignments, you know, letting them do some things and have some experiences in something other than a zero defects environment, then you're going to be surprised how much retention you get out of them. Fostering a team culture goes a long way. More and more in school, things are oriented towards team, group work, things of that nature. It's just not a lot of individual study these days. So they're used to that. They're used to some of the team culture. And that just wanting to have that feeling of belonging to something or a mission is something that goes a long way as well. Work flexibility, I don't think we have to talk too much about that one, given COVID. Whether we like it or not, we were forced into the flexibility kind of thing. So it's definitely not going to look like it did before COVID. So I think there's just some great opportunities there for people working from home. Cross-training opportunities, and then the things that I cannot overstate from my own position: engage leadership and recognition. You know, it doesn't take a lot to say thank you or to provide some recognition in front of our peers, and that's something that definitely goes a long way with our young employees as well. And that's just general stuff that we should be doing as good leaders anyway. That shouldn't be something that has to be coached or taught. You should want to recognize people for doing a good job. If not, then maybe you're the person that needs to go get some leadership training. So with that, I hope you've enjoyed the material I presented to you today. I'll be available in the Q&A section here. Hopefully we'll get some of those questions pulled out and have time to answer them. If not, just please reach out to me. We'll have the contact information posted, and I'm happy to schedule a meeting or talk through anything else on this topic that you would like. Thanks again for being here today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Aracelis Caraballo, Director of Cybersecurity, Governance, Risk, and Compliance with GTA. Thank you for attending our 10th Annual Summit. Accelerating Digital. Throughout the conference, we content yet to come. I hope you enjoy David Allen's segment on how to build and maintain the cyber workforce. We're constantly accelerating, building, and maintaining cyber workforce, and it may appear challenging at times. David shared with us a lot of information, top trends in cybersecurity. He also talked about workforce challenges in government, strategies to overcome those challenges, and innovating cyber workforce structure, training, certifications, information, cyber work pricing. This suggested structure aligns with the size of an agency and their total IT spend, so as the driver to determine the cyber staff needs of an agency. Joining us now for a QA session, State CISO David Allen. Welcome, David.
Thanks, Araceli. Appreciate the wrap up there.
Let's get right into the questions. Based on your experience, David, what are the top skills we should be looking for in a security professional?
Well, like I mentioned in my presentation, I mean, we definitely look for some of the skills and experience out there. You know, number one, especially if we're bringing somebody into a mid-level type position. But more importantly, especially with the entry level, you know, we're looking at just some of the previous training they've had, some things that kind of point towards an aptitude towards some more, you know, technical type training or just business acumen and things of that nature. I think we've done a really good job in just taking a holistic approach in evaluating candidates and making sure that HR is a real partner. And you know, how we're doing our postings, how we're evaluating who we're getting in, and definitely working with them to make sure we do a proper evaluation and identifying some of the talent. You know, a lot of it, cyber is big and it pays well. Whenever you put something out there for cyber, you're going to get 1 million applications. You know, so it's a lot of work to try and sift through those that, you know, may be a potential candidate. But at the end of the day, it's worth the effort. You know, reliance too much on automated means and some things like that you see in the corporate sector, I think is a non-starter, and you're leaving a lot of people on the table. And I work with a number of college students. We have capstone students in our own organization come in and do projects. And that's the story I get from them. You have highly qualified people coming out of a cyber program that can't even get a call back. So we really need to change the way we're looking at our applicants and how, you know, what resumes we see when we put something out there. Because we've seen through our efforts, there is talent out there to grab. I just think we need to do a better job of partnering with HR and making it known what we need.
Thank you, David. And this is a question we get often. How do we identify, develop, and transition current IT staff into cyber? A lot of agencies might be thinking of leveraging some current talent that they have in their information technology department and adding that cyber component to their. And do you have any special strategies that you can share with the audience on how to do that effectively?
Yeah, I just lean on going back to the very beginning. We were getting involved in cyber on the DoD side and building teams. You know, all we had to draw from was our existing IT workforce. So, you know, who was successful transitioning and who was not. And those that primarily were successful in transitioning to be a cybersecurity professional is that they really, you know, whether they were a network administrator, a system administrator, or a network engineer, that they really understood the bones of the technology. They understood how operating systems work. They understood how the networks work, because as you get into some of these exercises, it's great to have a tool, but at some point the adversary is going to break your ability to use that GUI and that fancy tool. So, you know, if you've got the ability to jump on things that are command line specific or whatever, and you understand how the internet works, those people were very adaptive. They could pivot to other things and still manage to defend the network in like real-time environments. So those types of IT professionals that really knew their business and understood everything down to bare metal, they make some really great cyber professionals, and that's something you can kind of build on if you don't have anything today. They just need a little bit of the training and what's different and a chance to apply it.
Thank you, David, for that great recommendation. We have one question here from our QA. Given the challenges of bringing on qualified information security officers and the great need that we have for them, has any thought been given to the state assisting agencies with the cost?
That's a great question. And one thing we would like to answer through the Cyber Board, we have the ability to create work groups to address some of these challenges. And in fact, the very first work group that we have created, and we've had a couple of meetings, is on workforce development to discuss some of those things I presented, from, you know, how we collaborate more just from a recruiting standpoint, the question of centralizing, talk about finding specific internships to address some needs and things of that nature. So any agency that wants to work with us on that or wants to be a part of that work group to kind of explore some of these options to help make us competitive, you know, they can just contact me directly, and we're going to continue on that path to try and generate some of those courses of action that's going to make it easier for agencies to fill their cyber needs.
And David, if I could add to your comment, that the Georgia Cyber Center has started a grant program that is specifically for veterans and their spouses, but it's an $8 million program that has been given to them by the Department of Labor to actually help veterans at that entry point in certain organizations. That's something agencies could benefit from if they are looking into acquiring that cyber talent, that information security officer, at a lower entry cost for the agency. And you can find more information about that at the Georgia Cyber Center website.
Yep, absolutely true. And you can look forward to seeing some additional communication on that as that program gets off the ground, and it'll come out of the Cyber Board. So thanks for mentioning that, Aracelis.